Did you know that one article in India's constitution gave an entire state its own flag, its own constitution, and the power to reject Indian laws? For 70 years, Article 370 was the most debated, misunderstood, and controversial provision in Indian politics. In 2019, it vanished overnight, but the story behind it is far more complex than you think. Today, we uncover the hidden facts, political drama, and legal battles that shaped Kashmir's destiny. Stay till the end. Fact number 15 will shock you. Article 370 wasn't just a constitutional provision, it was a promise, a compromise, and a flashpoint for decades of tension between India and the state of Jammu and Kashmir. While most people know it granted special status, very few understand its origins, the secret negotiations behind it, or why it became a political battleground. Today, we're diving deep into the hidden history, the legal jugglery, and the seismic consequences of its abrogation. Fact 1. Article 370 was drafted as temporary, but lasted 70 years. Article 370 was placed in Part XXI of the Indian Constitution under temporary, transitional, and special provisions. It was designed to be temporary until Jammu and Kashmir's Constituent Assembly decided its fate. However, when the state's Constituent Assembly dissolved in 1957, without recommending its removal, Article 370 effectively became permanent despite its temporary label. Fact 2. Kashmir's accession happened during war. In October 1947, tribal militants backed by Pakistan invaded Kashmir. Maharaja Hari Singh, the Hindu ruler of the Muslim-majority princely state, signed the Instrument of Accession on October 27, 1947, joining India in exchange for military protection. But the accession came with strict conditions. India could only legislate on defense, foreign affairs, and communications. Everything else remained with Kashmir. Fact 3. Kashmir had its own constitution and flag. Under Article 370, Jammu and Kashmir had its own constitution, adopted on November 17, 1956, and its own state flag. The state's constitution declared that Jammu and Kashmir is and shall be an integral part of the Union of India, yet it retained autonomy over internal matters, a unique arrangement no other Indian state enjoyed. Fact 4. Only 2 articles applied to Kashmir initially. When Article 370 was created, only Article 1 declaring India as a union of states and Article 370 itself applied to Jammu and Kashmir. All other provisions of the Indian Constitution required the state's consent. At first, 235 articles were inapplicable, 9 were partially applicable, and just 29 applied in modified form. Fact 5. The Sadr-i-Riyasat was Kashmir's head of state. Kashmir didn't have a governor like other Indian states. It had a Sadr-i-Riyasat, an elected head of state, and a prime minister instead of a chief minister. This system lasted until 1965, when the position was replaced by a governor following a series of constitutional amendments. Fact 6. Outsiders couldn't buy property in Kashmir. Article 35A, added through a 1954 presidential order, gave Kashmir's legislature the power to define permanent residents and grant them exclusive rights. Non-Kashmiris couldn't buy property, settle permanently, or access certain government jobs, a provision critics called discriminatory and supporters called protective of Kashmiri identity. Fact 7. The Constituent Assembly never recommended abrogation. Article 3703 stated that the provision could be abrogated only on the recommendation of Kashmir's Constituent Assembly. When that assembly dissolved in 1957, without making such a recommendation, legal experts argued that Article 370 had become a permanent feature, a fact upheld by the Jammu and Kashmir High Court in 2015 and the Supreme Court in 2018. Fact 8. Presidential orders slowly eroded Article 370. Between 1954 and 2019, the Indian government issued 47 presidential orders, gradually extending more provisions of the Indian Constitution to Kashmir, often when the state was under president's rule and had no elected government. By 2019, 260 of 395 constitutional articles and 94 of 97 subjects in the Union list applied to Kashmir, effectively hollowing out its special status. Fact 9. Sheikh Abdullah was imprisoned for 11 years. Sheikh Abdullah, Kashmir's popular leader and first prime minister, was arrested in 1953 after he began questioning Kashmir. He spent 11 years in prison without trial, one of the longest detentions of a political leader in Indian history. He was released in 1964 and later reconciled with India through the 1974 Indira-Sheikh Accord. Fact 10. The 2019 abrogation was done through legal jugglery. On August 5, 2019, the Indian government issued Presidential Order 272, amending Article 367, an interpretation clause to replace Constituent Assembly with Legislative Assembly in Article 370. Since Kashmir was under President's rule, the Legislative Assembly effectively meant the Indian Parliament. This allowed the government to bypass the requirement of Kashmir's Constituent Assembly and abrogate Article 370. Fact 11. Communication blackout lasted 5 months to prevent protests. The Indian government imposed a complete communication blackout in Kashmir on August 5, 2019, cutting internet, phone lines, and restricting movement. The internet was restored only after 5 months, making it one of the longest internet shutdowns in a democracy. Fact 12. Thousands of political leaders were detained hours before the abrogation. Thousands of Kashmiri political leaders, including 3 former chief ministers Mehbooba Mufti, Umar Abdullah, and Farooq Abdullah, were placed under house arrest or detained. The clampdown was designed to suppress any immediate backlash. Fact 13. Kashmir was split into 2 union territories. Along with abrogating Article 370, the Indian Parliament passed the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act, 2019, which split the state into 2 union territories, Jammu and Kashmir, with a legislature, and Ladakh, without one. This downgraded Kashmir from a state to a union territory, reducing its political autonomy and placing it under direct central control. Fact 14. The Supreme Court upheld the abrogation in 2003 after 4 years of legal challenges. On December 11, 2023, a 5-judge Constitution bench of the Supreme Court unanimously upheld the abrogation of Article 370. The court ruled that Article 370 was always a temporary provision and that the President's actions were constitutionally valid despite the absence of Kashmir's Constituent Assembly. Fact 15. International reactions were sharply divided. Pakistan called the abrogation an illegal annexation and approached the United Nations, while China objected, claiming it affected territories under its control. However, most countries, including the United States, treated it as India's internal matter. Within India, the BJP and several parties supported the move, while the Congress, National Conference, and PDP opposed it, calling it an assault on federalism. Fact 16. Women lost rights if they married non-Kashmiris under state laws tied to Article 370. Kashmiri women who married men from outside the state lost their permanent resident status and all associated rights, including property ownership. The Jammu and Kashmir High Court ruled this discriminatory in 2002, but efforts to formalize gender equality through the Daughters Bill failed multiple times. Fact 17. Kashmir's autonomy was greater than any Indian state. No other Indian state enjoyed the level of autonomy Kashmir had. While states like Nagaland and Sikkim have special provisions, Kashmir's autonomy extended to its own constitution, criminal code, flag, and residual legislative powers, all unique in India's federal structure. Fact 18. The abrogation was a BJP election promise since 2009. The Bharatiya Janata Party BJP included the abrogation of Article 370 in its election manifestos for 2009, 2014, and 2019. After winning a landslide in 2019, the party delivered on its promise within months, making it a defining moment in Indian politics. Fact 19. Pakistan and India fought 3 wars over Kashmir. Kashmir has been the flashpoint for 3 of the 4 wars between India and Pakistan since 1947. The first war ended in 1949 with the unbrokered ceasefire that divided Kashmir into Indian and Pakistani-administered regions, a division that persists today. Fact 20. The unpromised a plebiscite that never happened. In 1948, the United Nations passed a resolution calling for a plebiscite to determine Kashmir's future. Both India and Pakistan agreed, but the vote never took place due to disagreements over demilitarization and political conditions. The promise remains unfulfilled after 75 years. Fact 21. Kashmir's status remains controversial. After the abrogation, Kashmir remains a deeply polarizing issue. Supporters argue it brought Kashmir in line with the rest of India, enabling better governance and integration. Critics call it a breach of constitutional promises, a blow to federalism, and a unilateral decision imposed without Kashmiri consent. The debate continues to shape India's political and legal landscape. Closing call to action. Article 370 was more than a constitutional provision. It was a symbol of promises made, compromises struck, and autonomy granted. Its abrogation reshaped India's political map and sparked debates that will echo for generations. Which fact surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you found this deep dive valuable, hit that like button, subscribe for more political insights, and share this video with anyone curious about India's complex constitutional history. See you in the next one.